Makoto, thank you for joining me today. You're a UX product strategy consultant and leader with Impact, a firm helping enterprise and B2C development teams turn software visions into usable, high impact products. I'm Karol Kaczmarek, the co founder of Net Zero Compare. Our audience wants to understand how product strategy and UX excellence drive success, especially in technology driven transitions or sustainability sectors. And that will bring us to the first question I've prepared for you. As you know, defining great product strategy is very important. You've said that turning boardroom idea into code is what you specialize in. So if you could tell us, how do you define what makes a product strategy great in the first place?
Yeah, so kind of what makes a good product strategy is really being, you know, user-centric focused versus feature-centric focused. From my experience, a lot of companies, they want to just jump right into wireframes. They want, pretty looking designs, and they think that's a shortcut to getting to where they need to, which is a launch product. At the end of the day, they think they could get there faster by just going straight to that. But we know from experience in launching hundreds of projects over the past 20 plus years that this is not the most effective way. You really want to understand the problem first that you're solving for the user specifically, but you also want alignment with your leadership, and that's always been a big problem where you're in organizations where you pretty much have a lot of the leadership saying, hey, we know what we know, let's just start building it and then we'll make a lot of money. And that's generally not the case. It's almost like I relate it to, you're trying to build a house and you build the house first. It's got 2 levels, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and then you have the people move in. And then you ask, hey, so what do you think? And then, of course, making changes at that point is very expensive. It's hard to change something that's already been built. Same with code, same with product. You want to try to do that upfront research and understanding first before you start to build it, because after you do so, it's going to be very expensive to change.
Thanks so much. That should give us a foundational lens for the rest of conversation. And let's talk now about UX in sustainability and climate tech. So when working with companies in transition, sustainability or climate technology, how do you adapt your UX and product strategy approach compared, let's say, to more traditional SaaS or e-commerce products?
So, we do work with energy companies, and we have been working with for a while, I'd say over the past decade. And, when it comes to enterprise software, there's versus like consumer-based products, there's definitely a difference, because enterprise software, you're generally the people that are using it generally didn't make the purchase to purchase the software. It's usually somebody above them, or a few levels above them, and say, hey, this is something you have to use, make it work. And for somebody who has a workflow that they have to get through for enterprise, they're going to do whatever's the easiest for them. And whether that's working with your software, working with pencil and paper, not using it at all. I mean, this is something that you will understand when you have to find and solve a problem, and you got to get to it as fast as possible. Whether that software helps or not, that's something you'll find out pretty quickly. And if you're disrupting the user by creating some brand new software for them and it disrupts their workflow, they're not going to like it. And, it's a little bit different than with consumer-based products, where there's competitors that you can go and buy, a widget from one website, and you can find 5 other websites that maybe are selling it. And, your experience is to try to reduce the friction as much as possible and try to get them to convert. So it's a different mindset. There's similar types of UX, intuitive kind of patterns that you can use that can really help on either side of the fence. But when it comes to enterprise, you really want to nail down what that user workflow is, understand their pain points, and then try to optimize those pain points in certain moments in time. And generally, when you get to developers that are, if you have a company that has development trying to make designs, generally what you're going to get is a very complex UI that developers want to show off all the features that they've developed. And it becomes very noisy. It becomes very hard to learn. The learning curve becomes problematic and expensive. And so if you switch to somebody new starts, and all of a sudden now they have to get trained on the system. And, these are kind of things that you have to understand, that are some big differences between enterprise and consumer products.
Got it. I
Mhm.
think that context matters a lot when you're building for impact, not only conversion as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
And let's talk about complex system for enterprises and their usability. So Impact works with highly complex software, logistics, robotics, energy. How do you make rich data and heavy workflows intuitive without losing capability?
So this gets into, again, some of our processes that we've really optimized and figured out a way to kind of incorporate different teams into understanding what the business goals and objectives are. And it's kind of like a three-pillar approach. And this is why we have three eyes in our name, Impact. But kind of the three-pillar approach is, you have the business side, you have the user side, and you have the actual development side. And so when we approach, it doesn't matter what, robotics, whatever, cybersecurity, we try to get the users, or we try to get the leadership to understand, okay, give me an understanding what the business goals and objectives are. Get the person, the CEO, who's the leader in the room, to agree and say, hey, this is why we're doing this. These are our KPIs. This is why we're trying to increase revenue by X percentage, and get alignment, because almost 100% of the time, companies make assumptions of what they think their leadership knows or what they agree to. But when we sit them down in a room, I call it my therapy session, where we sit them down in a room and we get an understanding of what they think the business goals and objectives are. There are variances. And so getting the leader to really sit down and agree and say, this is what I decide is the most important thing, is such a powerful thing to see, and to get through with the organization. And then from there, we get them to understand, okay, what are the users, what are they actually doing? What is their workflow throughout the day? These are our main archetypes that we're trying to, that use our software. And we get them to understand pain points, we get them to understand goals, and then we tell them how that ties back up into the business goals and objectives. Because when we're, as designers, we're trying to design for a thing, um, many times design can be very subjective. You can do drop downs, you could do form fields, you could do wizards, you could do whatever, processes different ways. But if you say, well, we're designing it this way because it ties up to this business goal and objective, it's very easy to then say why you're designing something to a certain extent. But then the third pillar, which is development and the constraints, we get our set of features and we realize, okay, what features are really risky to develop. It takes a lot of time and money to do it, but we know it's a very high reward. So let's identify those very risky features. Let's do some user testing around that. Make sure we know what we're doing, and make sure we're designing it right. And then things we know that are very easy to build, let's throw that to development, fill their backlog, and we know that that's something that we have to have in our application. And so, but it's nothing really risky to build. And so those are the kind of things that we try to help identify throughout an organization in a very, very shortened time frame. Because if you do this in a traditional way, you generally would get a designer that's running around talking to different SMEs, talking to different product owners, and everybody telling them something to do, to tweak something. And then as they move it up the ladder, that person says, no, 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 let's do it this way. This is how I want it. And so that actually increases your go-to-market time, and increases the cost, the scope creep, and all that. And so if you really have gone through this process, people have seen what good design is versus what bad design is.
I like the way you described those initial meetings with customers as therapy sessions.
Yep.
Very good one. You're known as a B2C conversion rate expert, yet you operate in enterprise and product strategy domains. How do you translate a conversion mindset into enterprise or impact software contexts?
So when it comes to basically conversion rate, it's a similar psychology when it comes to getting people to do something with the least amount of friction. And sure, we're with enterprise, you're not getting something to buy, but there's certain techniques that translate very, very easily between consumer and enterprise that you can leverage in order to make things much easier. So let's say you have to have somebody sign up for to build an account. Um, it's a form field, and there's certain practices that you can do with form fields because when somebody sees a big form, because here, let me give you an example, but that's a little bit more concrete. But let's say you a lot of executives say, "Hey, I don't want a ton of clicks. Reduce the amount of clicks. Reduce the amount of like pages and things like that. So put everything all on one page." But the problem is, most people when they see that, whether it's consumer or enterprise, you get overwhelmed. You're like, "Oh my god, I gotta fill out this entire form page manually." It creates fatigue, creates mistakes, it creates more problems if there's an error or whatever. And so, actually doing it in like a more digestible way, where maybe there's more clicks, there's more pages, but it's a more enjoyable experience. And so, being able to like that works for both cases, enterprise or consumer. So being able to do that effectively and use and leveraging what we know, like onboarding. Onboarding is something that really helps somebody who's brand new to the system or brand new to your website, getting them to like easily understand how things work and making them feel like before they become a power user, everybody's new. They're not sure how it works. So why not handhold them through the process? And that's an enjoyable experience even though it's more clicks or more pages, it's something that you can't go by that metric. You have to go by a different metric to show that this user experience is actually better for the person that's using it.
That's actually interesting because many enterprises don't think about conversion like
Mhm.
B2C, but I always think that, or maybe they are not aware that they need many of the same insights.
Yeah, it's you should be tracking metrics no matter what. If you're using enterprise, you should be tracking metrics of like time on task, NPS scores, things like that that are still important. Even though the customer has bought the system, it's still important for you to understand those metrics because, you know, throughout the course of the year, people are making decisions based on like, hey, let's launch this feature, or let's change this feature to look like this, or let's introduce this new thing. And if you don't track those metrics afterwards or during the process, like you do in a conversion rate, then you're missing out on opportunity. And nowadays with AI, with the way in which you can accelerate your development and go to market times, your competitors are doing so they're able to copy and surpass you so much faster. So you have to have both speed and direction in order to stay ahead. And if you're just kind of building it and forgetting about it and not doing this type of like um, metrics improvements all the time, consistently improve. We call it Kaizen and when I was in manufacturing, where you continuously improve whatever you're doing. And this is something that you should be doing. Otherwise, you're going to be surpassed by everybody else who's using AI to force multiply their teams to build something that is better than your product.
Agreed 100%. Now let's talk about design and product alignment. Your website mentions customized strategies using lean and agile methods. How do you work to align UX design sprints with engineering and product teams in large organizations to avoid silos or conflict?
Yeah, I think that this is a very simple answer. You communicate, and it seems like a very easy solution to that is just, oh, let's just talk more. But that's you have different processes. Obviously, you have agile and things like that that people follow, but some do a hybrid approach, some not. I mean, it all comes down to communication and whatever's the most effective way in which you include everybody so you aren't as siloed. Because yeah, I've been in organizations and helped out organizations that you're talking Fortune 500 companies. It could be some of the biggest consulting firms. And yeah, you'll have certain groups that are so good at like following good processes, good design, good design to development handoff. But then you have these other ones that don't even talk to each other. And I mean, that communication is so key. And so whenever we go into an organization and we start to talk about these things, we want to include everybody, decision makers within these tasks. And we actually do like we try to push like a tri-track agile methodology, where like you do have like a discovery phase in which it's mostly heavily more leaning towards design, maybe 80-20, where 80% is design, 20% is development. But the development team is aware of what's coming down the pipe, so they can tell us what is going to be like, hey, that drop down that you're creating, it's better in a modal window because it's going to take us 100 hours versus 10 hours to develop. And then you could come up with a compromise versus just letting the developers change to whatever they want just so they can complete the backlog. You don't want that happening. That's something where we're constantly in communication, whether, if you're good at just communicating through, Slack channels or whatever teams or whatever you're using. I mean, just being one-on-one with your developers who's helping create that. I mean, that's very simple, and a lot of people don't do it. Some want a formal meeting where you're showing off the designs and you're getting feedback and vice versa, where it's the delivery phase where it's now 80% development, 20% dev, where you still want design involved and not just throwing it over the fence once they're done, but actually saying, hey, let's come up with a solution because it is harder to develop X, Y, or Z. So that's kind of how we encourage that type of thing, is just it's better communication.
So long story short, the communication is the key, which is also important from our side. This is funny because this is exactly what we always repeat week after week during our weekly meetings within our organization.
Mhm.
The communication always needs to be improved. Now let's talk about risk reduction and so-called software cheat code. You've described impact's value as reducing risk and accelerating time to market. In technology for the energy or transition sector, where risk is high and obviously stakes large, how to deliver on that promise?
So it's really, like I mentioned before in our process, it's really identifying features that are important and but are very risky, where you're not quite sure how to develop it, what it entails, and you don't want the development team just to start building it, because by then, I don't know how many times I've been in situations where maybe we come in halfway through a development process where they thought a feature was supposed to be, oh, this is going to solve everything, and let's just start building it. And it turns out once they launched it, none of the users are were actually using it. And so you really want to identify those features that are high priority but are very high risk, and you want to get into more of the user testing, prototyping. I mean, there's so many tools out there now that allows you to do quick prototypes versus hand coding them first and then trying to get feedback, which a lot of them still do. Again, they think by shortcutting to development as fast as possible is the way is the easiest way to shortcut a launch, and it's actually just that's high risk. Again, it goes back to the building a house first and then asking users to live in it. Is It's very risky. And so, yeah, sure, once in a while you might get lucky and you might think you know what you know, um, but when people start using it, you realize it's not the way in which it was intended. And so, yeah, by doing these type of things and identification up front, it really helps. It helps companies really. It's a cheat code to help them get to. It's like taking two steps. Take a step back so you can take two steps forward. And that one step back always seems to scare executives, saying, "Oh, we're going to waste time. There's no way we could do that." But in all reality, I surpass you in the end.
Understood. Thank you very much for this insight. I think risk control is something our audience is often very keen about.
Mhm.
As products scale, let's say multiple modules, integrations, global users, design systems become important. How do you decide when to build a formal design system versus keeping things lightweight and adaptive?
Yeah, I mean, when you build a design system, there's it's something where you need to have stability in what you're building first before you start to develop, the kind of, I guess, documentation, which is the design system. And, with design systems, if nobody uses it, it can be very expensive. if nobody's using that design system. So you really, there's things in which you can accelerate just a bare bones kind of framework. So if you're using a certain front end development framework, if you're using, let's say especially if you're on like a Next.js or something like that, where that you have a certain components that are kind of out of the box, then you don't really want to push that envelope too much, because obviously customization of components out of the box is cost and it's more development time. So basics you can keep, like the component wise, but then when you start to get into the page development and stuff, you want to wait until those are stabilized first before you start to solidify on what does that design system looks like. But then obviously once you have that design system set up, it saves so much time, especially when we were talking about before, the silos that are out there. A lot of companies do have different development teams working on different aspects of an application or a website. And so in order to maintain that consistency, you need to have that design system, so they can all reference, like, okay, what does this page look like? What do these buttons look like? What does this form field looks like? So that way you're not developing and spending time trying to find what those components and designs look like. And obviously when it comes to brand and colors and things like that, that has to be really key, especially for more consumer-based products. You have to know where that's being utilized as well. And so if you have a proper design system that is at least being used by everybody, you break down the silos, you create more efficiencies between teams, and that's kind of where you have to understand where to, like, push on, when it has things been kind of settled and not so dynamic, and when things are ready to, like, you continue to iterate on.
Now let's talk about metrics that matter for the product strategy. So many teams track conversion rate, for instance, retention, NPS. But in your experience, especially for high impact or transition software products, what metrics do you think should leaders focus on, and how do they connect to ROI?
So you'll have to, there's some things that are going to be commonplace, and that's going to be, your NPS scores. That's going to be just something that everybody wants to track. Time on task, uh, things like that are very important, and kind of understanding the funnel and workflow of somebody through those metrics. Like, are they getting stuck somewhere? Are they branching off to something else? You want to monitor, like, navigation, where are people kind of clicking on through the navigation to get to where they need to get to. We also are, for AI, we're analyzing what prompts are being used and where are they going from there. When are they dropping off and stop using the AI? Maybe that's in the system. Those are things that are commonplace. But you, as an organization, you're selling your software, and your marketing and sales team is saying, hey, you're able to find, say, cybersecurity, you're able to find systems that are compromised 25% faster than using this other system. Um, and so if you're able to show that through metrics and show even better improvements than that, and people can see that, well, then that helps your organization get that ROI and actually sell it as a value proposition, because it's actually true. So those are things that we always try to keep aware of. Like, even though we're design, we still want to help out customer service. Like, customer service calls have dropped because, now we're having an onboarding wizard that helps people to reduce calls of people who are confused about what to do next. And so these are things that you're going to have to understand through your organization. Like, are these KPIs that your customer service team, your sales team, your marketing team, what are they trying to hit? And is there something that we could do within the application that can easily transfer into something that gives you great ROI?
And that kind of clarity helps justify UX and design spend, obviously.
Exactly.
Now let's look ahead. Over the next, let's say, 5-10 years, how do you see product strategy, UX design, and enterprise software evolving in the decarbonization and transition economy?
I think we're all out of jobs. It's just going to be robots and AI taking over all of us. No, I'm just kidding. I hope not.
Maybe not in 5 years.
2 years. No. I think in the future, there's definitely going to be, we know that everything is accelerating. Even me, I've been in this, and just you're overwhelmed by the capabilities of what AI can do and what it can't do. And so you're constantly having to see, like, okay, and this something is where I've coined the term the AI competence gap. And what I mean by that is that when people use AI, they're like, if I'm a designer and I have AI code for me, I think it's something magical. Oh, I don't need any developers anymore. This thing does all the code for me. I could vibe code everything. I can get rid of my entire development team, my entire security team. It does it all for me. I'll just design it. But when a designer sees the code, they're like, yeah, it's okay. There's some good things, but there's no way I would ship this code. It's just because my competence gap is very big and I don't know what it is, but it seems magical. And the vice versa works the same with a developer trying to design, and every single, thing coming out of Claude looks the same and same colors and same kind of format. And designers like, yeah, there's no way I would ship this because there's 50 other sites that look exactly the same that are live right now. And you can tell it's made by Claude or GPT, and you're not going to stand out. And so the problem is when you get to the executive level, they even have less. Some of them don't even have any experience with design or development. They're just good at business, and so they think, oh my god, I could get all these AI agents and get rid of my entire organization and just have one person running this for super cheap. And that's not the case at the moment. And so I think I think there's this pendulum that's kind of swinging back and forth for people understanding, okay, is this an AI bubble? Are we like in the .com bubble where if we had a website or put .com at the end of our name, we're making millions or billions? Same with AI. If we put AI into our products, are we going to make millions and billions? If that's all, who cares what we do? So I feel like there's some of that frostiness of that bubble that's forming. And in the end, we're going to kind of come out and see, like, obviously you have to use it and leverage it, but you have to also be very experienced and aware with what it's producing. So you know what prompts to ask. Cause yeah, maybe one person who doesn't know about design can maybe prompt their way into something that's okay or pretty or good enough. But it took them, quite a bit of time, quite a bit of prompting, and it took a lot of money to, especially as things get more and more expensive. Using AI is not going to stay cheap. It's not going to be free forever, and things are going to get more expensive. So, is it cost effective versus me? I could go in, I could wireframe something very quickly and not use AI, but maybe I use AI for something else, for some more data driven research that's more time intensive. But I know what prompts to ask, and I could do something to give me some ideas in two or three prompts. And somebody super junior has no that took, weeks. So that's the kind of thing that I see that's kind of heading to the future is really optimization of what you're doing, because maybe you can create something for your organization or what your workflow is using AI, and you don't need to buy that SaaS software, or you don't need to buy that, Chat GPT wrapper that now GPT just launched something that just got rid of it. And so there's disruptions that are happening. And so I don't know, it's going to be an interesting next 2 to 3 years for sure. 3 to 5.
We'll see what the future brings. Okay, thank you very much for those insights. Before we wrap up, is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd want to add, especially for products, UX teams working in climate, sustainability, or energy tech fields?
Um, I don't think so. I think there's some things here where if you are an organization and you're trying to launch a new product or you're trying to redesign your product, um, if you, I always say if your grandma can't explain your product strategy, you probably don't have one. and um, and I think it's it's something where you have to you have to understand, like, the environment is changing, is changing rapidly. And for many companies back, 20 years ago, when they're just building websites, they were still they're so focused on the features. What can we have on the website? What can we do? Instead of the user experience. And luckily, that's what kind of came out. Apple came out of that. Google came out of that, knowing that the user experience is so central to what you need to do and to really convert and to win the competition. And so now back and with AI being pushed, it pushes tech forward, but it also pushes that feature. AI is just another feature. That's all it is. So thinking that that's all you need as your strategy is not a strategy. So keeping in mind, like you have to be really intentful to have speed and direction and continuous improvement in order to be successful nowadays moving forward.
Makoto, thanks for your insights. We'll publish highlights of our discussion on Net Zero Compare so our audience can see how strong product strategy, UX design, and thoughtful execution enable technology led transition and impact.
Cool. Appreciate you having me. It's been great.